Since that beautiful spring morning in 1820, when through the boy Joseph, light and truth were revealed to the world, education has been central to the mission of the Church. The restored gospel brings with it the charge to teach the world the commandments and doctrines of a loving Father in heaven and His Son, Jesus Christ. Each year, hundreds of thousands of students learn these doctrines and commandments at the hands of commissioned teachers who, through faith and dedication, bless the lives of generations to come. This is a brief history of the church education system. From as early as June 1832, there was a sense of urgency regarding the status of education within the church. A quote in the first issue of the Evening and Morning Star promotes a new kind of school.
The disciples should lose no time preparing schools for their children, that they may be taught as is pleasing to the Lord and brought up in the way of holiness.
Harley P. Pratt was appointed to preside over one such school in Jackson County.
This class, to the number of about 60, met for instruction once a week. The place of meeting was in the open air under some tall trees in a retired place. To attend this school, I had to travel on foot, and sometimes with bare feet at that, about 6 miles.
Education, particularly of the Latter-day Saint youth, was continually stressed.
Next to the worship of our God, we esteem the education of our children and of the rising generation.
After the saints moved to Utah, subsequent to the martyrdom of the prophet Joseph Smith, Brigham Young re-emphasized the importance of education. Within only 3 months of the arrival of the saints in the Salt Lake Valley, President Young established community or ward schools. These schools would continue to thrive from 1847 through 1875. The Utah Constitutional Convention of 1882 precluded the teaching of sectarian or denominational doctrine in any schools supported by public funds. As a result, many Latter-day Saint youth found themselves in educational settings that did not include any religious education. Various other religious denominations were fast establishing private schools with better paid teachers, books, and equipment, and inviting Latter-day Saint youth to attend free of charge. This was seen by many as a wedge to pry Latter-day Saint youth from the faith of their parents. To counteract these developments, the Church established a system of academies that grew from 1 in 1860 to 23 by 1911. Situated in Utah, Arizona, Wyoming, Idaho, Canada, and Mexico, these academies provided both secular and religious instruction for Latter-day Saint youth. Though successful, these academies never adequately served to accommodate the large numbers of Latter-day Saint youth. Subsequently, many of the youth continued their enrollment in public or other privately run institutions. During this time, additional measures were taken to provide religious education. In a letter to state boards of education dated October 25, 1890, the first presidency, Wilford Woodruff, George Q. Cannon, and Joseph F. Smith, laid out plans that would provide a framework from which the future seminary program would take shape.
We suggest that in every ward where a church school is not established, that some brother or sister well adapted for such a responsible position by their intelligence and devotion, as well as their love for the young, be called, as on a mission, by the bishop after consultation with the president of the stake, to take charge of a school wherein the first principles of the gospel, church history, and kindred subjects shall be taught. A strenuous effort should be made to gain the hearty cooperation of the parents, as without their aid, the school will measurably fail in the object of its creation.
In 1911, Joseph F. Merrill was called as a counselor to President Frank Taylor of the Granite Stake and was given the responsibility to support education in the stake. In their family home evenings, Sister Merrill recounted story after story from the Bible and the Book of Mormon. Upon asking his wife where she had learned these stories, she explained that she had learned them in James E. Talmage's theology class at the Salt Lake Academy. President Merrill thought that the young people in the stake could also benefit from being taught the scriptures in a formal setting. It was then that President Merrill proposed the teaching of the standard works in classes where students would be released from high school for one class each day. His proposal resulted in the construction of the Granite Seminary building in 1912. 70 students were enrolled that first year. The idea of seminary spread rapidly. Local stakes obtained approval for release time for religious instruction from district school boards in many areas, and small seminary buildings were erected. By 1918, just 6 years since its beginning, there were 13 seminaries with a total enrollment of over 1,500 students. Viewing the success of the seminary program as well as the expense of running church academies, the General Church Board of Education in 1920 recommended the closure of several church academies. Some of the former academies were converted to normal colleges and in later years transferred over to state governance. In June 1926, the Church General Board of Education considered a situation in Moscow, Idaho, and decided that something should be done to provide religious education for the 100 or so Latter-day Saint students attending the university there. The first presidency was asked to find a way to provide a suitable building for instruction. The church subsequently accepted a proposed plan to create the first LDS Institute of Religion. The church purchased a plot of ground readily accessible to the students and immediately planned construction of the building. In October 1926, Brother J. Wiley Sessions, who had just returned from presiding over the South African mission, was called to preside over the new institute. The first classes started in the fall of 1928 with the standard works as the texts. In the early years of providing formal religious education, CES teachers were encouraged to set a higher academic standard for the study of religion. Subsequently, they were encouraged to obtain advanced degrees at some of the great centers for theological training. To some degree, the result of these efforts proved to produce teaching that reflected the scholarship of secularism without much faith and testimony. This did not go unnoticed in the councils of the church. Under the direction of the First Presidency, courses of study were set up for teachers to anchor them to the fundamentals of teaching religion with faith and testimony. Many of these courses took place at the Brigham Young University Summer School in Aspen Grove. It was here in August of 1938 that President J. Reuben Clark delivered an historic landmark address known as the Charted Course of the Church in Education. His address to those religious educators gathered there on that day would become a beacon in church education, and to this day stands as an authoritative guide for all seminary and institute teachers.
As I have already said, I am to say something about the religious education of the youth of the church. I shall bring together what I have to say under two general headings: the student and the teacher. I shall speak very frankly, for we have passed the place where we may wisely talk in ambiguous words and veiled phrases. We must say plainly what we mean, because the future of our youth, both here on earth and in the hereafter, as also the welfare of the whole church, are at stake.
In April 1950, presidents from 11 states in Southern California met with the Church General Board of Education to discuss the possibilities of establishing seminaries in Southern California. The state presidents unanimously recommended that the program be introduced at once. 6 pilot classes were begun with a total enrollment of 200 students. Rapid expansion of the program clearly demonstrated that the new early morning seminary classes were succeeding in Southern California. These non-release time seminaries operated under the same standards as the release time seminaries, meeting for 1 hour each weekday morning and using the same courses of study. Non-release time seminaries continued to expand and were taught by part-time teachers. The miracle of this new program was that relatively few of these teachers had public school teaching credentials. They were business and professional people, housewives, and sometimes public school teachers rather than full-time religion teachers. The chief requirements were a testimony of and obedience to the gospel and the ability to inspire the youth. By the middle of the 20th century, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints began to take on the proportions of a worldwide church. The effect of this development upon the education program of the church was profound. It was determined that wherever the church was organized, the seminary and institute programs would follow. In the early 1970s, the home study program was initiated. This program continues today for the purpose of serving the needs of those students living in areas where meeting on a daily basis for classroom instruction is impractical. From its humble beginnings, the influence of the church educational system continues to grow. Currently, religious educational programs are found in virtually every church location throughout the world, with over 32,000 teachers instructing over 500,000 students annually in 136 countries and territories. Whether in institute, release time, early morning, or home study seminary, Latter-day Saint youth are being provided with an opportunity to study the gospel and increase their faith in the Savior, Jesus Christ. The church educational system is striving to assist the individual, the family, and the priesthood leaders in accomplishing the mission of the church, to invite all to come unto Christ and be perfected in Him. All who are asked to teach and lead in the church educational system become part of this great mission.